Hi, welcome to the 13th floor. I'm Marty Duda, and today we have Herriot Row with us. And Simon is the face and name and pretty much everything else behind Herriot Row. How are you doing?
Up to a point, yeah, good, thank you.
Nice of you to stop by and play a few songs for us and have a chat. You've got a new album out. It's called Lesser Stars, which has been a while in the making, but it's finally reared its ugly head. How are you feeling about it?
Good, really good. Relieved, excited, nervous, and every so often don't care.
Yeah.
You know, it fluctuates all over the place, but yeah, it's on its way.
Cool. Yeah. Well, as we were talking, and you actually recorded most of the stuff in San Francisco several years ago.
Yeah.
And finally it's making its way. What was the process of getting it, taking so long and finally getting here?
So I recorded mid-2014 in San Francisco.
Right. Why in San Francisco?
Because I wanted to record at a cool analog studio called Tiny Telephone with a producer who I was a big admirer of called John Vanderslice, who founded the studio.
I've heard of him.
Yeah, he founded the studio in the late 90s. I was a fan of his music. I was also really into the albums he had produced for the Mountain Goats.
Oh, right, yeah.
Who I had an affinity for. And so I just hit him up and sent my previous records in Bandcamp, and we eventually got it rolling. San Francisco is not a cheap place to spend any amount of time, so I was actually lucky enough to have a Creative New Zealand grant, but I had applied for a grant to help me with the arduous task of recording in the suburb of Mount Eden.
Okay.
So once I changed up, right up to San Francisco, it was still a huge help, obviously, but I did come back in a wee bit of debt.
Yeah.
So there was the clawing back of the debt.
Yeah.
There was the knocking on a few doors and seeing what interest I might be able to find with the finished product. And then there was eventually Rowan Evans, who runs the wine cellar and also has his little micro label, vinyl label, Arcade Recordings, putting his hand up and offering to initially put out a 7-inch.
Right.
So we put out the first single as a 7-inch, which was quite a long process in itself. A vinyl product.
Yeah.
Even though there was only 2 songs on it, it still took a long time to come to fruition. And at that point, I was sort of like, well, I can't get my head around releasing this beautiful artifact on vinyl for a single and then just chucking the whole LP up on Bandcamp. A precedent had been set, and so at a certain point, Rowan said, well, let's do the LP as well.
There you go.
But there was a number of stepping stones, and then of course, vinyl takes a long time.
Yeah.
It's like 3 to 4 month turnaround if you're lucky.
Yeah.
And then on the other side of that, I've been working up a band. I worked with musicians in San Francisco. I came back and I had this record, but I've also been getting over the last 2 years, I guess, finding a stable band who is Dave Flyger on bass and Stu Howard on drums. They both have played in a band called Paquin, which is Tom Healy's project, and Stu in particular, and occasionally Dave now, they've also both played in Anthony Tonnen's band.
Oh, great. Okay.
So yeah, I still have to claw them.
Of course. Yeah. Well, everybody's got to do what they got to do,
but
and play in several configurations,
multi-band rhythm sections is the way. So all those things have sort of kept it sort of files on my computer for a while, but Now it's in
Now
your
it's all
hand.
happening.
Woohoo!
And you're going to perform a few songs for us just solo today.
Yep.
And the first one that we're going to hear is one called Out of the Ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you can tell me a little bit about that before we hear it.
Yeah. Out of the Ordinary. Well, it's a finger-picked acoustic ditty, I suppose. A friend of mine lent me a guitar, and when I took it out of its case, it was in a mysterious new tuning I had never used before. And so while they were on tour, I set myself the task of trying to write a song in this strange
Was it
tuning.
in a strange tuning, or had it just become detuned?
No, it was definitely, it sounded far too beautiful to be an accident. So I actually hadn't managed to finish the lyrics for it by the time I had to give the guitar back. So I took notes of what the hell was going on with the strings, and eventually got around to writing that song. What else to say about it? Oh, I guess if I was going to make one little admission, it would be that there is a line, the world is full of fools like us, overtired, oblivious to the ocean. And I suppose it's a little cheeky of me to sort of make that universal when it was potentially only me who had realised he'd gone a whole summer without getting to the beach once.
Well, I feel I'm definitely guilty of that myself.
But it definitely felt like
it's a universal thing that happens. Yeah.
It felt like a bit of a potentially not a stretch to be some kind of universal metaphor for urban fatigue.
Okay.
But you know, there's other things going on in the song, but I don't want to talk about all of them.
That's all right. Right. We
yeah.
can leave it to everyone else's imagination.
Indeed. Yeah.
Okay. Let's give it a listen.
Cool.
Won't you take me out of the ordinary? Oh, I've been a long time longing to leave. Won't you take me out before I become too weary to care what this life has left up its sleeve? And the world is full of fools like us, overtired, oblivious to the ocean. I was trying to keep my cool, but you read on my mind a question. Why do you sleep in a single bed? She answered me coy as a sage. She said a cage in search of a bird must have found my heart instead. And the world is full of fools like us, overtired, oblivious to the ocean. So dance me all the way out of the ordinary, but I'm gonna have to feel it to believe. Dance me all the way before I become too weary to care what this life has left. Oh, I
Okay, we're here with Simon from Herriot Row, and you mentioned that you put out a couple of records under your own name, and you've now putting under this moniker. Is there some significance to that? Is there a reason why that's happening?
Yeah, a bunch of reasons. One was I was just a wee bit tired of doing my own press under my own name.
Yeah.
When I started releasing albums under my own name, Simon Comber, almost everything I was into was, you know, as far as sort of solo-ish singer-songwriter stuff was under monikers,
right,
and nom de plumes. So I've already mentioned the Mountain Goats, but there was, you know, Smog.
I was going to a feeling I was.
Yeah, who became Bill Callahan. Who became Bill Callahan. A guy who I was super into, FM Cornog is his name on records in the credits, but he calls himself East River Pipe. So there were all these, you know, a Cat Power would be another example, you know.
Yep.
So I was kind
East
of being
River Pipe, that's a great
it's a great one. Apparently he empathized with the sewage coming out of the East River Pipe. Beautiful songs, everyone should check them out.
All right.
But I suppose I was being a wee bit of a contrarian compared to the Americans, but by the same token there was this other crew of, I suppose, relatively underground New Zealand artists, though not underground to me, who were all under their own name. Peter Jeffries and Alistair Galbraith would be the big ones, you know. Yeah, so I was kind of like trying to do the opposite of all the Americans. I was sort of secretly hero worshipping in my room whilst feeling comfortable to go under my own name because of the New Zealand precedents. But a lot of people kept saying, you know, you need a nom de plume, you need a moniker. And I started to come around to the idea the more I started doing gigs with a band. And at a certain point, you either just really embrace your name as a brand, or you start to feel a wee bit weird about having your name everywhere when it's so many people helping you out that you couldn't do without. You know, even if you just want to talk about your friends putting up with you when you're, you know, when you've read a review that, you know, you only got 3.5 stars instead of 4, and or, you know, it might have even been positive, but they didn't understand that one song, and it all becomes a bit crazily egotistical, and also, yeah, you get to a point where you think an overarching moniker would be a nice thing.
Yeah. And does it take some of the pressure off of you?
Well, I thought it would, and this was in theory. You see, I'm talking all about in theory. In practice, I would say no, not really. You know, it's a nice change essentially, and it took me a long time to think of one I was comfortable with. I have other, you know, potential band names / monikers I was thinking of, which in hindsight I'm incredibly glad I didn't go with.
Right.
Herriot Row is named after a street in Dunedin where I was living in Dunedin when I guess was writing most of the songs that would become my first record. And in the liner notes to my first album, it actually mentions going up to Herriot Row and looking down on the city, and I guess I felt like I was in a certain headspace when I was writing those, you know, first batch of songs. I mean, I'd written a bunch before that through the years, but, you know, I suddenly felt like I was making some kind of ground and getting to a point where I had a record together. And when you're doing it for the first time and you're writing the first songs that you really feel you can put out into the world, but you haven't stepped into the industry yet, you know? You haven't ever tried to release anything. You're still in this sort of quite beautiful, naive headspace that's a lot more pure. It's a lot more untainted by, you know, figuring out how the heck to get your head around the industry, which has got just so many facets to it. And so I guess I got to a point where I'd released 3 records, 2 LPs and an EP, done a bunch of tours, held down a job at the same time, and I realised how out of touch I'd got with that initial headspace. And so I was actually talking to a friend about how I missed that headspace, you know, back in the day in Dunedin when I used to walk up to Herriot Row. And then suddenly,
there you go.
There it was, and it had a ring to it.
Yep. And it kind of gives a continuity to what you've been doing as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, admittedly, you'd need to own my first album on CD.
Yes.
And open up the things to get that continuity. And I still have some copies.
Very good.
In a box.
I'm sure they'll be on the merch table.
Oh, they will indeed. Yeah, but so, and actually when I came up with Herriot Row, I forgot about that. And so it was a nice surprise to go, whoa, there's some continuity here. Thank goodness.
It all comes together.
I added an R to the word Herriot when I realised that it had inevitably been named after the Edinburgh street of the same name, just to kind of give it a wee bit of separation. I also liked how there's an artist who used to call himself the Microphones, Phil Elverum, who now calls himself Mount Erie, and it's named after a mountain. Obviously in Anacortes, Washington, and he added an E to Erie to make it, you know,
his own.
Erie as in dark and mysterious. But I like the idea of sort of just slightly tweaking a landmark and
it also helps when Googling.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, I'm very savvy with the web.
That's right. Now we're going to hear another song. This one is called The Usual Business. Do you have anything to say about that before we hear it?
Yeah. I went through a little insecure phase of suddenly feeling that I had missed out greatly by not doing classical studies at school. And you know, a lot of my favourite songwriters, for want of a better term, would be coined, I suppose, literary songwriters, which, I mean, it sounds kind of pompous and pretentious, but the only thing I read into it is that they are maybe a little more than others utilising devices that might be considered poetic or found on the page. Anyway, you read enough interviews with people like Leonard Cohen, and you just start to feel they've just blimmin' read everything, and you know, studied the Torah and what have you. And I just thought,
I think Leonard Cohen did read everything.
Yeah, wow, there we go. And I just thought, oh man, how could I have not done classical studies at school and never read the Iliad? You know, never read Homer, and never read Milton and what have you. So I spent a year making up for classes I hadn't done, and reading these old, long poem stories, one of which was the Divine Comedy, which was the one that really stuck with me, maybe because I was 35 when I read it, and the you know, the oft quoted opening lines are about being midway through the journey of your life, which is, you know, at that time when it was written, it was, you know, would have been the biblical age span.
Now 55 is the new 35.
Well, yeah, fingers crossed. But I still sort of course, projected all this, oh, I'm midway, you know, probably. And so I sort of read it with a, you know, more of a personal connection to it than the others. Also because, you know, it's so much more obviously kind of metaphorical and modern, and there's not hundreds of Greeks killing each other. It's not so easy to relate to. Well, not in my life.
No, you had.
Though, you know, throughout the world, you can probably find many precedents. But yeah, there was this great I adored that book, and there was this amazing metaphor in it for a certain time of the day, which I took to be kind of twilight, is when the darkness is falling, and it was when a sailor turns toward the shore. That was Dante's way of saying this is what time of day it is,
Right.
and that was twilight. So I took that line and began a song where I tried to imagine everything that was happening at twilight throughout the city, an urban, a sort of archetypal urban city. Took it from there, and yes, what I came up with is a song called "The Usual Business."
All right, let's hear it.
Time the sailor's heart is turning to the shore. A cross-examined lover's eyes are falling to the floor. About the time a prisoner drifts on a dream beyond the gate. An officer is speeding towards some scene, a little late. Just the usual business, and I'm headed into town to sing for my cigarettes with a painted frown. Hey, Mr. High Roller, can you spare $1 for a fellow man? About the time the sailor's bride is turning to the sea, her little girl is dressing to get into the show for free. The sun is fading out, the neon lights are flickering in. The preacher's premonitions are being drowned out by the din. Just the usual business, and I'm headed into town to sing for my cigarettes with a painted frown. Hey, Mr. High Roller, can you spare $1 for a fellow man? If you please. You seem in a hell of a rush. No need for pleasantries, and it's a compliment when I say I can tell by your type of tie that you make good money, if nothing else. I'm headed into town to sing for my cigarettes with a painted friend.
Okay, we're back here with Simon from Herriot Row, and you're about ready to hit the road. How are you feeling about that?
Good, yep, getting excited. Got a few gigs in the lead up to the tour, which is helpful. And we start in Wellington on September the 8th at Caroline.
Right.
We'll be doing Whanganui, Christchurch, Dunedin, and then back to Auckland.
And you'll be with your band.
I will be with the Herriot Row band.
There you
yes.
go. And do you enjoy the process of being on stage and getting those songs out?
Yeah, I mean, I find that the nerves you get from performance are much more easily sublimated
Right.
on the stage. You know, you can sort of channel adrenaline, whereas the nerves I get from booking the tour and waiting for replies, there's just nowhere to put that energy.
Right,
you
right.
just have to go to the gym and try and pedal it off, you know.
And so is it stressful to be doing all that stuff yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably as stressful as you let it
Right.
be.
Yeah.
And I tend to be very generous with how stressful I let it become. I give it a lot of room to weigh on me. But it's nice to have a band with you who have got your back up to a point, you know.
Excellent. Well, we got one more song we're going to hear. It's called "The Beggar." It's the last song on the album. What can you tell me about that one?
The Beggar is named after a first volume of poems by the New Zealand poet R.A.K. Mason. I was drawn to a little story about that volume of poems in which he allegedly and mythically hurled them off Queen's Wharf.
Right.
So disgruntled was he with how few people had bought them. Yeah, can you imagine? No market for original poetry in the 20s in New Zealand?
Hard to believe.
Yeah, and I just thought, well, it just seemed like kind of a wonderful myth that you couldn't really prove nor disprove.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's people, people from older generations who might have some authoritative knowledge that it didn't happen. I think A.R.D. Fairbairn is rumoured to have started this, but I took it completely seriously when I was writing this song called "The Beggar," in which I suppose sort of, well, I suppose you'd say that the narrator of the song, if we could use such a phrase, is following in the footsteps of Mason, or at least Mason's ghost, you know, sort of. It just seems like, you know, there's nothing nice or graceful or noble about getting in such a stink when you're trying to, sell your art, which you have chosen to try and make product. And if you're having trouble shifting the units, there's nothing particularly poetic about that, is there? But I suppose the song was an attempt to make that struggle that I sort of. Mason seems like, you could say, is one of the earliest New Zealanders to have, that we know of at least, who has been kind of preserved in anthologies and the like, to have taken on that struggle, and it just seemed like a nice gesture to write something with him in mind.
Yep.
Yeah.
Considering you're probably doing the similar struggle right now.
Yeah, although I don't think CDs are a very good thing to throw in the water. So I'll just.
And certainly
besides,
not vinyl.
I'm gonna, the unit cost on the vinyl was too expensive, and I'm very hopeful I'm going to be getting rid of all of them.
I'm sure you will.
Yeah.
Well, good luck on the tour.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming here and playing
Pleasure.
these beautiful songs for us, and we'll see you around.
Yeah.
up and sick of it all. Feeling like a lesser star, you let your bitter verses fall down into the water. The sword into the stone. It was all the same to you now, a pearl or an eye, coral or bone. The ocean conquers everything, a holy truth, but not wholly true. And all your bitter verses, like a silver vessel, may outlasted you. May outlasted you. So tonight I follow your ghost. I hear the wind, I smell the brine. I carry my burden like a candle, all these bitter verses of mine, down into the water. The sword into the stone. It was all the same to you now, a pearl or an eye, coral or bone. And if it's all the same to you, then it's all the same to me. If it's all the same to you, then it's all the same to me.